We are awakening together. This is our weekly gathering we hold online. For more information, visit our website, awakening-together.org. We'd love to see you there.
Thank you. Welcome. Good morning from the East Coast, and welcome to our weekly gathering at Awakening Together. I'm super grateful to be here with all of you, our last gathering before Thanksgiving. And today's message is going to focus on practicing mindful activism. Right now, our world, as it, I guess, has always been, but it just feels heavy with suffering. Sweeping national and global suffering. And I don't know how each of you are feeling, but I am struggling with this. This growing economic equality, social injustices, polarization, war. It's difficult. And as I reflect on what I'm seeing and experiencing, I'm asking the question, what is our spiritual response to injustice? So today we'll take a look at the Dharma and the concepts of mindful activism and begin to answer this question together. So this morning, hold space in your heart for this conversation, where you are on this spiritual journey. And as Marisol plays the morning opening song, I just invite all of you to greet each other in fellowship and in the chat. Always love that song. Takes us to a deeper place when we hear it. And that's what music does. So I invite you to hear our purpose. We are an assembly of equals joined in common purpose, awakening to one true self, within an appearance of many faiths, many cultures, and many symbols. We seek to discern one truth and to rest in its embrace. And today, the core value that we'll focus on is number 2. We realize everyone is equal, and no one has been given any spiritual intuition that has an authority over the spiritual intuition of others. We live in this value by listening to each other, respecting each other, and allowing each one to be where they are. Thank you. So let's dive into some announcements. Dan, that was beautiful. I'm so glad that we're showing this movie. I haven't seen it yet, but I mean, like, how timely in just having honest, open conversations about understanding other people and where they're coming from is so perfect for what we are going to chat about today. So we're going to play our first song. This is a song I'm sure you're familiar with, Talking About a Revolution from Tracy Chapman. Tracy wrote this song when she was 16. She grew up in a poor town of Cleveland, Ohio, and she had received a scholarship to a prep school in Danbury, Connecticut. And everyone there seemed to be pretty tone deaf and unaware to some of the difficulties that other people were facing in other communities that maybe weren't as affluent. And this song is really a message to pay attention, to wake up, to see what's going on outside of our small bubble. And as this song starts off, it talks about revolution as a change, right? She starts saying, they are in the welfare lines. But then she says, I am in the welfare lines, that I am those same people. I am that person. I came from that community. And that how we are all that same person. And I would just, as you listen, think about, where does revolution begin? Does it begin, feeding the homeless? Or does it start with some level of within ourselves? Enjoy. Thank you. Please join me in prayer. This morning, as we sit here in fellowship with this beautiful spiritual community, in the presence of the Holy Spirit, we allow our hearts to be wide open and to have the courage to be with and witness any suffering that we might be feeling or experiencing, where we hold our pain and our sorrow, our hurt and our loss and fear, and to see it stirring in us. Without judgment, we hold it like a mother holds her child. And also we see those in our fellowship with us today who also feel this sorrow, this pain, this hurt, this loss. And we see it in our family and friends. We hold it for our colleagues at work. And even for those whose faces we don't know, but know only by heart alone, living in our neighborhoods, across state lines, across the globe, maybe experiencing poverty or war, or maybe being told that they don't belong because of the color of their skin or their gender identity. We feel their sorrow and hurt, and we hold space for this suffering that we all bear. And in this same space, we feel the heart softening, evoking great compassion. Let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living beings. Let us pray that all living beings realize that they are brothers and sisters, all nourished from the same source of life. Let that knowing that my suffering is your suffering be the awakening of a revolution in our hearts, a revolution that breaks injustice, that breaks way for a truly humane society built on love and peace. Amen. And now I'd like to invite Rona to do our readings for today. Thank you, Rona.
Thank you, Erica. Good morning, everyone. Grateful to be here. These readings come from the heart of the Buddha's teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. And the first reading I'll be doing is from chapter 28, Touching the Buddha Within, pages 249 and 250. Sometimes we feel as though we are drowning in the ocean of suffering, carrying the burden of all social injustice of all times. The Buddha said, when a wise person suffers, she asks herself, what can I do to be free from this suffering? Who can help me? What have I done to free myself from this suffering? But when a foolish person suffers, she asks herself, who has wronged me? How can I show others that I am the victim of wrongdoing? How can I punish those who have caused my suffering? Why is it that others who have been exposed to the same conditions do not seem to suffer as much as we do? You might like to write down the first set of questions and read them every time you are caught in your suffering. Of course, you have the right to suffer, but as a practitioner, you do not have the right not to practice. We all need to be understood and loved, but the practice is not merely to expect understanding and love, it is to practice understanding and love. Please don't complain when no one seems to love or understand you. Make the effort to understand and love them better. If someone has betrayed you, ask why. If you feel that the responsibility lies entirely with them, look more deeply. Perhaps you have watered the seed of betrayal in her. Perhaps you have lived in a way that has encouraged her to withdraw. We are all co-responsible, and if you hold on to the attitude of blame, the situation will only get worse. If you can learn how to water the seed of loyalty in her, that seed may flower again. Look deeply into the nature of your suffering so you will know what to do and what not to do to restore the relationship. Apply your mindfulness, concentration, and insight. and you will know what nourishes you and what nourishes her. Practice the first noble truth, identifying your suffering. The second noble truth, seeing its sources. And the third and fourth noble truths, finding ways to transform your suffering and realize peace. The four noble truths and the noble eightfold path are not theories. They are ways of action. The second reading comes from chapter 27, the 12 links of interdependent co-arising, page 221. The 12 links of interdependent co-arising, praticya samutpada, literally, independence, things rise up, is a deep and wonderful teaching, the foundation of all Buddhist study and practice. Praticya samutpada is sometimes called the teaching of cause and effect, but that can be misleading because we usually think of a cause and effect as separate entities, with cause always preceding effect and one cause leading to one effect. According to the teaching of interdependent co-arising, cause and effect co-arise, samutpada, and everything is a result of multiple causes and conditions. The egg is in the chicken, and the chicken is in the egg. Chicken and egg arise in mutual dependence. Neither is independent. Interdependent co-arising goes beyond our concepts of space and time. The one contains the all. The Chinese character for cause has the character great inside of a rectangle. Cause is great, yet at the same time limited. The Buddha expressed interdependent co-arising very simply. That this is because that is. This is not because that is not. This comes to be because that comes to be. This ceases to be because that ceases to be. These sentences occur hundreds of times in the discourses of both the Northern and Southern transmissions. They are the Buddhist genesis. I would like to add this sentence. This is like this because that is like that. In the sutras, this image is given. 3 cut reeds can stand only by leaning on one another. If you take one away, the other 2 will fall. For a table to exist, we need wood, a carpenter, time, skillfulness, and many other causes. And each of these causes needs other causes to be. The wood needs the forest, the sunshine, the rain, and so on. The carpenter needs his parents, breakfast, fresh air, and so on. And each of those things, in turn, has been brought about by other conditions. If we continue to look in this way, we'll see that nothing has been left out. Everything in the cosmos has come together to bring us this table. Looking deeply at the sunshine, the leaves of the tree, and the clouds, we can see the table. The one can be seen in the all, and the all can be seen in the one. One cause is never enough to bring about an effect. A cause must, at the same time, be an effect, and every effect must also be the cause of something else. Cause and effect are. The idea of a first or only cause, something that does not itself need a cause, cannot be applied. Thank you for allowing me to read.
Rona, thank you for embodying that piece in such a beautiful way in your reading. So, on November 6th, this is the day after the US election, there were many people in the United States who were having a very different kind of mourning. Some woke up celebrating, relieved, hopeful maybe. And then there were some who woke up heartbroken, afraid, angry, or some mix of all of them. For my part, I was the latter. I was in the latter camp. I felt deep sadness really more than anything else. Not because who I voted for lost, but in recognizing that the majority of the country's values seemed so far from my own based on the outcome. And that this perceived separation made us not just strangers to each other's hearts, but even to some other people, enemies to each other. And if you have a social media account at all, I'm sure you've seen some increased hateful and angry posts from people of all different cultures and political views and backgrounds. I think that maybe this was the first time I had ever felt a certain level of, maybe despair is too deep, but difficulty and fear after an election ever. And just witnessing, especially now, a few weeks later, just the activism that's being taken place, this potential destruction of rights and protections of our environment, of LGBTQ friends and trans rights, women's reproductive health, rollbacks in Medicaid and healthcare, and the uprooting of pathways for citizenship for immigrants and asylum seekers. And my first thought was, I didn't do enough. My first thought with all these emotions is I did not do enough. And since I was a little girl, I'd always been involved in mission work. You know, it was mission work more than scripture is how I came to really understand my faith as a young Christian. And since then, I've really dedicated my whole career to nonprofit human services. I do stuff in the local community, really with the intention of easing people's suffering and at least playing some small part in changing their lives. And it feels like all those areas that I've been advocating for 20 years are at risk. And while I don't know that it's true that I haven't done enough, it did make me reflect as an interfaith minister on what is our spiritual responsibility to activism. Because to me, it's always felt just baked in to what it meant to be human. Humans struggle and suffer, and activism has always been a call to that suffering through social change. The American Civil Rights Movement to end segregation and discrimination, the women's rights movement to establish voting and reproductive rights, and even more recently with Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and LGBT and trans rights. It's because of their suffering, our suffering, that activism exists. And spirituality and religion across all faiths have some version of the golden rule. In Christianity, it's do unto others what you would have them do unto you. In Buddhism, it's treat others in ways you yourself wouldn't find hurtful. In Islam, not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you have wished for yourself. I mean, this is how I came to realize that all faiths were like different languages that speak truth to us in different ways we can understand. That ultimate truth of our deep connection to one another, that there is no separation, that your suffering is my suffering, your light is my light. And even when I inflict suffering on you, I also create suffering for myself. And this is the concept that the Buddha teaches of interbeing. This insight that all things exist in relationship to each other, that these chains of cause and effect arising, co-arising at the same time weave reality together. So for today, to help us look a little bit more deeply into the question about our response to injustice, I've sort of turned to the teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. And I think I'm convinced that the reason I turned to Buddhism is I have an affinity for lists. Like there's just like, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. I'm like, great, I know exactly what to do. My A-type brain gets warm and fuzzy about it. So the Four Noble Truths, the foundation of really Buddhist teaching, and the Pali word for truth, sakha, also means the reality, which is actual, what is real. And as Rona had read, the Buddha felt that these were not philosophical. These were like scientific. This is like the same as gravity. When I drop this pen, gravity, the law of gravity says it will drop. Buddha says that these truths are that scientific law. That when we don't know them, we're sleepwalking through life, just making the same mistakes over and over and over again and perpetuating suffering. And so when we look at suffering in the context of the response to larger societal and global issues, we must understand the nature of ourselves, our own human suffering, where it comes from, what we do about it. The Buddha is sort of like a great spiritual doctor who accurately diagnoses suffering of the human heart, understands where it causes and where it comes from, and gives us a prescription to heal it. And so we'll go through that diagnosis. So as we ask ourselves, when we go through the Noble Truths and we ask ourselves, how do we apply these teachings to our daily lives and to the real things that are happening? Because Buddhist teachings are very practical. How do we handle strong emotions? Greater anxiety around fear and uncertainty of the future in our economy? How do we handle strong emotions around greater anxiety, around frustration and anger over injustices and inequality? I'm looking at all this stuff that Nancy Mace is posting, our U.S. representative, South Carolina, just putting biological over the women's restrooms and just feeling anger. What do I do with that? And even Sarah McBride, her response has been just almost like the Buddha within, to be able to meet that hate and that anger with sort of a deep understanding and a bigger purpose. But these noble truths, they teach us how to handle that. And guess what, guys? Thanksgiving is coming up next week. We have to meet sometimes with our families that don't see things the way that we do. And how do we talk to our loved ones, or how do we talk to our friends, or how do we talk to people in our workspaces? And how do we heal our relationships? Because we can't have frustration and anger and hurt in our mind and then try to come at with love. We have to heal that first. So how do we create an environment internally and externally to practice, to heal, and transform? That's taking that anger, frustration, that fear, and turning it into compassion. That's the transformation in the present moment for our ancestors, for ourselves, for future generations. Because this healing doesn't just heal what's happening now or the relationship between you and I or him and her. It is healing the past too. And it is healing the future all at once. That's how powerful this work is. And our practice in this community at Awakening Together is the spiritual refuge for one another to show up spiritually and safely in our practice of our faiths, and to create environments of mindfulness where we can learn how to heal those things and then bring that environment of mindfulness out of the this sanctuary and into our homes, into our workspaces, into our Board of Ed meeting, into the PTA meeting, into our larger society, our communities. This concept of mindful activism, this engaged Buddhism coined by Nhat Hanh, right? Obviously, famous Buddhist monk, brought his Buddhist teachings into action after witnessing a lot of suffering around the Vietnam War. He said, prayer is great, prayer is important, and also it's not enough. Our compassion has to reveal itself in action. Thoughts are actions, by the way. So it starts there. And these noble truths are a guide. So as I mentioned before, the Buddha is like a doctor healing the suffering of the human heart. And in order for the doctor to prescribe any sort of medication, first we have to know what's the symptoms? What are we diagnosing here? And this is the first noble truth, is to recognize and understand what is called dukkha, which is the Pali word for suffering. So suffering, I mean, it's just like dukkha is pretty broad in the sense of suffering. Like suffering could be, I had a really stressful day. I experience dukkha. I am ADD. I lose my keys and my sunglasses daily. Dukkha daily. And it's also losing someone close to you, losing a loved one. It's as much as stubbing your toe as it is to lifelong trauma. It's dukkha. But there's something even more within dukkha, right? There's this suffering, this dissatisfaction. This word is even deeper. Dukkha's never really getting what we want. And the duality of dukkha extends to happiness and joy and pleasure too. We don't really see that. So if I get the big promotion, yay, I see my child born and is in my arms, I'm making love, I'm even in fellowship with all of you, I have this joy from that joy, and it's short-lived, it doesn't last. It's just a moment. This is what impermanence teaches us. And if we cling to it, we're left with this pain of not having the material or spiritual or physical pleasures that we thought we would always have. So happiness, within happiness, is the seed of dukkha. And that is the reality of life. I know I'm depressing everyone. Don't worry, it gets better. This is the duality. This is the interbeing of happiness and suffering. It wears a mask. Maybe pride is a mask of insecurity, or achievement is a mask of disappointment. But this is the first step in mindful activism, is to understand the nature of suffering and stop chasing the illusion. We do that for ourselves. And we look deeply into the nature of this type of suffering, we will know what to do to restore a relationship or to take right action. There's a police officer, I was watching some sort of video on just social activism, and there was this police officer that had taken some mindfulness courses, and she went through it, and she was like, how am I going to apply this? Right? How am I going to apply mindfulness and nonviolence as a police officer? I carry a gun. I may have to shoot someone, as protection. That's part of my job. How can I show up in mindfulness? And so she allowed herself to go there. And it was like a couple days after she had really, taken this retreat, and she went out and she was on a routine domestic violence call. And it was a divorce situation, and the mother was getting custody over the father, and the father was holding the little girl. She must have been like 6 years old, and there was enough to make the little girl afraid and the mother really afraid, and that the police were called. And she said, in a routine situation like this with a kid being held and what was going on, she said, I would have put that guy in cuffs. That would have been what I did typically. I would have put him in cuffs. Done deal, take him away. And she goes, I applied mindfulness. And she looked at the situation, and she talked to the man and the little girl, and played with the little girl a little bit and got everybody to feel sort of safe. She created an environment that created safety. And then within that moment, she was able to get the little girl to actually go over to the mother, get them out of the room. And she didn't end it there. She kept mindfulness going, and she talked to that husband, that father, about what was going on. And you could see his anger recede, because he was being talked to, because somebody was asking to understand what he was going through. The stress of not being able to pay child support, the fear of losing his daughter and never being able to see her again, the feeling of failure. All of those things were so real, and they manifest as anger because we don't know what to do with it. And she sat with him in mindfulness. And after that was done, nobody was arrested. He was fine. Everything was okay. 2 weeks later, she was at a convenience store or a deli, and that guy was there. And he went up to her and hugged her, like this big guy, like 6 foot. And she said she was like 5'2", just hugged her, picked her up, and said, you saved my life that night. We don't think that mindfulness can be this thing where if we just look and try to understand suffering a little bit, that we could really save someone's life. It seems like, where's the connection? What's the correlation? But that's the reality of what can turn around. And what made him different was maybe not the words that were said. It was how she showed up. It was the energy that she brought. It was a place that she created, an environment in her mind of safety. And I'm here to understand you, not to judge you or blame you. Right. And to see deeply how we are all co-responsible. Because if she had showed up as she normally had, his anger would probably have persisted. Maybe there would have been some violence. I don't know. But you just don't know how people are going to respond. And we're co-responsible for how we show up and what response. I heard a long time ago when I started life coaching that communication is the response you get. And I was like, all right, that is a good example of communication being the response you get, because of how she approached him. And in Rona's reading, when a foolish person suffers, she asks, who has wronged me? And shows up, how can I punish who has caused my suffering? And a wise person says, what can I do to be free of suffering? And so that brings us to the second noble truth, the cause and the origin of dukkha. There's a Sanskrit word, tristina, right? It means to thirst. So if our suffering is, I don't know, a breakup or a car accident we're in, or we're fired from a job, even me, my chronic pain in my back, all of these sufferings have one thing in common. We want the circumstances to be different from the way they are. That's it. Even me in striving for justice is a craving and a thirst, because there's no right or wrong in thirst. It's the thirst itself that creates the suffering, the dukkha. So my thirst to have my back healed, my thirst to have, my friend's lung cancer healed, my thirst to have a child that I cannot have, even my thirst for enlightenment if I have it. It's not, there's no love or hate in the thirst that makes one better than the other. It's just the thirst itself. And the desire for these things never last. Desire is an addiction. I mean, we know that the impermanent nature of things leave us desiring, just leaves us more desiring. It fuels more desire. And the only way to practice is to learning to detach from the craving and the thirst. Gun rights are a big issue in the US. I've had massive school shootings, even the March for Our Lives. Like, children are scared at school. They're even considering asking teachers to have guns in certain states. Even if we destroy all the guns, let's take all the guns, we'll put them on Venus and Mars or the moon. Without destroying the weapons in our hearts, people will learn to continue to create suffering and murder in other ways. It's not the guns, it's what's in here. Because of hate and resentment and betrayal that go back generations. Look at Israel and Palestine. Generations and generations of wounding. So here's the deeper human challenge: is mindful activism is to create an environment where we can heal, we can transform by looking deeply where hurt stems. And that means partly in educating yourself where hurt began. So if I do the research on Israel and Palestine, that's a part of that healing. But information is not enough. Then we have to create the environment in our minds and how we show up with others who are afflicted in these groups. And sharing safe spaces for healing and conversation. I think during the Black Lives Matter movement, there were some spaces and offices where there were African American people who needed to emote what was going on and needed safe spaces to do that. And for people at a meeting to say, like, I don't understand what's going on here, or why somebody might be coming to a meeting and feeling this level of despair or stress. Those conversations started to be created. I don't know if they've continued. In some spaces they have. But this also allows us to see that there is no right or wrong, that there aren't really sides. I think the Buddhist practice and the practice of the Four Noble Truths is really about having a breakthrough to see beyond opposites. There's a better word for it, and it's not coming to me right now. But just the paradoxes of things. That left is right, life is death, happiness is suffering. If there is one, there is also so the other. When we practice to understand dukkha, the root of our actions is in here: thought, emotion, behavior. We carry thoughts into action. And if those thoughts are in wrong mind, going after thirst, there is wrong mind, we create suffering from wrong view. Nhat Hanh had a phrase that he gave Martin Luther King, which he carried into his marches on the Mall, which is, man is not our enemy, it is ignorance. It's the fear, it's the despair. If you can see beyond someone else's actions. If I can see beyond Nancy Mace's actions, very difficult. But that understanding of that wrong view, right, could help someone see right view. And in that interbeing, perpetrators are also victims. They're victims of wrong view. That means they're victims of suffering. And the deeper understanding is learning why each side feels so threatened. But we all play a part. I mean, we need the Greta Goldbergs of the world to be environmental activists and call people out on their stuff. We need activists to block pipelines and volunteers that can build diplomatic bridges and go heart to heart with people. All are a part of this, but you bring mindfulness to it. Breathing and deep looking and compassionate presence that you show up in meetings with people who strongly oppose your views helps change and create the space. So, coming to it, the third noble truth is nirvana. Now, as a person who has not realized nirvana, I'm probably like a colorblind person describing color to you, but I'll do my best. The Sanskrit word for nirvana is extinguishing or to blow out. So I had always thought nirvana was like a state to achieve. But nirvana is more like a transition. So when we extinguish thirst and attachment and extinguish desire, then the result is not necessarily, it's not a cause and effect, like it's not a result of, it's just a discovering a truth. So when we talk about peace in our minds, in our lives, in our communities, and in the world, peace is not another desire. It's a letting go of the false so that you can just see the truth. And seeing the truth is nirvana. And I think as mindful activists, we are all truth seekers. And as truth seekers, there is a path to follow. And the Eightfold Path is really that way of saying, how can I reduce suffering? What is the wrong way? Is leaning into the thirst and the craving. The right way is to reduce the thirst and not keep repeating the same things over again. Right view is to see through diluted words and actions of yourself. What our culture celebrates as success is flawed. There's no amount of money or productivity or wealth or pleasure that can get rid of dukkha, right? It needs that seeing, it needs that wisdom that we talked about. And then the intention is to say, well, now that I can see things as they are, now I can set a new intention of how I show up. Because all our suffering is from dukkha, the best intention is to cure ourselves from it and everyone else. And once we do that, then we can speak, then we can act, then we can live, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Then we can do that. And that leads us out of thirst and dukkha. And the final three, effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, is the practice. We're practicing it all the time. Practicing it, training our mind, and we're not going to be perfect all the time. We're going to show up in anger. We're going to do it wrong. And there's always an opportunity for correction. But this is the path of life. It's not about belief or prayer. It's about a realization of what's real. And I believe that through this path, we can touch the Buddha within, and we can arrive at freedom, happiness, and peace. And all of that opportunity is there. There's going to be a lot moving forward, that we're going to see changes in our world, and we need to know how to show up. And the Buddha has taught us how. And I look forward to bringing this deeper into my life and my practice and sharing that with all of you in this community. Thank you. So as we move into our second song, it's my girl, Alicia Keys, We Are Here. This is just a reminder of our why. She was, when she was pregnant and with her second child, and she was bringing her second child into the world, She was at some sort of group for mothers, and they said, oh, why are you here? And I'd say, but she took it deeper because she was thinking about the world that she was bringing her daughter into. And so I want you to listen to her lyrics here about remembering your why, your deeper why to this practice. Thank you. I love Alicia Keys. I feel like she's a soulful poet, and she always seems to nail the hammer on the nail for me. So at this time, I'd like to open and invite anyone who feels called to share. If there's anything that's on your heart that you want to share at this time, welcome. And of course, there's obviously no obligation or pressure to do so. There'll be some sharing after our third song, so that's a great time to reflect and contemplate on what you heard today and how it's touching you, and to be able to share. But I thank you all for receiving this message, for holding space for it. Sometimes it's just difficult even to hear it, and it's, to receive it as a gift. You have to want and be willing to do that. And so I'm grateful to you all for showing up in that way today, and to be able to share what's on my heart. So our third song is from Glory. It's called Glory. It's Common and John Legend, and it's from the soundtrack of the movie Selma, around the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King's march. And this is a song about transformation. Yes, there's a lot of fight in it. There's a lot of passion in it. It's about transformation. And it reminds us that the work is ongoing. And it's a work that we all take part in, whether we realize it or not. And it's much better to be aware and to be awake and to be a part of it, than to be asleep. So enjoy. No, I don't know, Marisol, if there's anything that anybody had any reflections, if they wanted to share at this time, we can do this, do it now. Jan?
Yes, I would just like to say that your homily this morning has just opened me up. I can't verbalize it, but I feel a softening and some lovely tears. And I just feel opened up. And I just thank you so much. It's been beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I think that's what it's about. That's softening. Like when you feel that happening, that's the transformation. Sometimes we have to do it moment to moment, or day to day, but that's the feeling. And it's beautiful, and it doesn't even need to be articulated in words, because that we know it. That's what true knowing is in that feeling. Thank you, Jan. Yolanda.
I just wanted to very quickly say how grateful I am for this message. It's been my adult life journey to work in social justice as a queer, trans, HIV positive person, and to know that we can talk about all of this in our beautiful sanctuary. I'm so grateful, and I'm so thankful for you to deliver this message today. Thank you, Erica, so much.
My God, thank you. Thank you for living your truth of who you are in courage and showing up that way every day, because it takes that. And I feel blessed too to be a part of a community that creates environments and safe spaces for seeing truth as it is without blocking it out. And yeah, so I'm with you. Thank you so much. Dan.
Thank you for your message. It was very powerful. And I think for me, the thing that speaks loudly about setting up an intention that the world will share comes from our heart first. And it's also from the realization that we are experiencing exactly what we're asking for. We're experiencing the realization, and this is where the trust comes in, but we're experiencing the realization that there's no separation. It looks like separation, it feels like separation, but the step to awareness, the step beyond this, what we're seeing, the step that is the miracle. That's the miracle. We're really asking for a miracle to move beyond what we're seeing and not let it take us down, because it's impossible to leave our source. It's impossible. And yet that's what it feels like. And we're going to have our doubts. We're going to have our doubts about ourselves and about the world. And Luke in chapter 5 talks about that. He says, you're going to have your doubts, you're going to have your self-hatred, you're going to have all these things showing up. But don't believe it. Believe the inner wisdom that tells you you're innocent and you've never separated from the truth. And yeah, that kind of acceptance of what is truth, of the reality of all, is what allows for the end of the dukkha and the willingness to hear the other side, what seems to be the other side, but it's actually our own self-doubt. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. It's I love we can take scripture to validate our experience and then take that idea of separation from an intellectual exercise, right? Intellectual, and bring it into our hearts and into the practice through mindful activism. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. I just want to thank everyone again for holding space and receiving this message, and grateful to have been joined with all of you here today and for your beautiful shares. Thank you for joining for our weekly gathering.
You've been watching our online gathering. It happens weekly on Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. To join us live in the sanctuary, visit our website, awakening-together.org. You'll want to click on Online Sanctuary in the main menu, and then in the drop-down menu, look for How to Enter the Sanctuary. Right there at the top of the page is a clickable link. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary and join with you in fellowship. Thank you again for watching. Also, please know that if you'd like to stay connected via the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube, you can subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. We hope to see you in the sanctuary.